Hey everyone, Gage Ryan here, and I'm here to show you guys my Kaiju deck today. So, Kaiju is a deck that I've played at this point for 5 years, something like that, 5-6 years, and it's been off and on. I haven't played it like every single day of my life, and I did take a pretty decent break from the game, probably a little over a year, where I just wasn't playing nearly as much. But it's a deck I've always come back to, and it's a deck that I always think is always on the edge of being a real contender, but I've always just had issues getting the entire deck to gel. And this is the first time in my lengthy history playing this deck where I can say that I think this deck has turned a corner. This build, I think, is very competitive. And so when you have a deck that has the ability to stop virtually any first turn field, I've always thought creates huge potential for a deck. And it's always been, the problem for myself has always been finding cards that work well with Kaiju and being able to play more than just Tribute 1, Special 1, and play like a traditional Kaiju game. You have to be able to have cards that go with Kaiju. And so a lot of people like using cards like Invoked or whatever have you. Invoked isn't the worst, but I'm not a fan of that version. You can also, people have played Gradles. I don't like the Gradle version either. Yosenju Kaiju isn't terrible if you're trying to play like an OTK version. But I've always wanted to play more of a control-based Kaiju deck. And I think I have a pretty good version for you guys right here, so let's get right into it. And one last thing before I get started, I'm going to try and make this a little more in-depth because a lot of people don't really know how to play pure Kaiju. It's a very different kind of strategy that you have to play as opposed to other variations or just playing like 3 Slumber and 3 Kaiju in a deck. It's way different when you're playing a pure version that plays the field spell and whatnot. So first for the monsters, you have 3 Jizukiru and 3 Gamasiel. These are basically your main monsters that you want to have on your field at the end of your turn. So more often than not, it's going to be Jizukiru because it's a lot easier to keep on the field and maintain, and because sometimes you don't always have the card to pair with Gamasiel that can keep it in play past the turn that you summon it. So Jizukiru is more often than not what you're using, but there's a lot of other cards and a lot of other options so that you don't just get the chance to play like Jizukiru or Gamasiel control. Like if you have Gamasiel out and like a lot of counters, I mean you're pretty lucky, but it doesn't happen all that much, so. But Jizukiru, for those that don't know, because yes, believe it or not, the Kaiju monsters have actual effects. When a card effect is activated that targets exactly 1 card, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters and negate it, and then you blow a card on the field and it doesn't target. So Jizukiru is a really big all-star in the deck. And same with Gamasiel. Gamasiel, when a card or effect is activated, you remove 2 counters and negate and banish it. So, like I said, these are the 2 cards you want on the field. You don't play cards like the Sticky String Kaiju, you don't play Godarla, you don't play any of these other cards that really just don't provide a lot of value when they're on your field. You want to be able to have your Kaiju effects come up every game that they're on the field, but you also want to be able to control the game and not have to use Kaiju effects and only Kaiju effects to win your games. So then you got 3 Doggeron, you remove 3 counters, and it's a Raigeki, but you don't use it often at all. It's much better whenever you have Kaiju files. If you notice, I don't play Kaiju files. I think the card's really bad, to be honest with you. But when you have Doggeron, you're usually just giving it to your opponent, like in 99% of cases. And the same with 3 Radion. Now, Radion's a little more useful because you can link with it, but by and large, you're just giving it to your opponent because they can't really do anything with it. And I mean, like, there have been plays where, like, I give my opponent a Radion, I'll put a Gamasiel on my field because I have, like, Dogmatic Punishment or something like that, and I can just Dogmatic Punishment away the Radion, and then use whatever graveyard effect I have with that, and on top of that, I get rid of the threat, and now I have a Gamasiel with counters for them to deal with. So that's it for the Kaiju lineup. We only play 12. You know, you can play 13, 14, you can play less than 12, but honestly, I think that if you want to play a pure build that utilizes the Kaiju monster's effects and want to use enough of them so that you're not bricking with them but still drawing them, I think 12 is probably the correct number. And you don't want to play Godarla or something like that because then you have to give it to your opponent and then they can half your monster's attack. Or if you put it on your field, unless you're going to be able to OTK them somehow, Ghidorah just doesn't really provide a lot of value. So that's why you play your 12 and that's it. So then on to the Kaiju support cards, if you will. First, 3 Fairy Tale Luna, which is just broken. It's pretty close to staple in most Kaiju lists, unless it's very specific. But Fairy Tale Luna is great. It's a Stratos. It gets you a +1. You can bounce Kaiju and then Kaiju a second monster or something like that. And then 3 Ecclesia. Now, this is one of my favorite additions to the deck. It just adds so much versatility. It gets you cards like Punishment. It provides another normal summon. You can link with it if you need to. It just really does it all. Then 1 Pankratops. And Pankratops is just good board breaker. I mean, it's a going second deck every day of the week, so it never hurts to have Pankratops. It's one of my favorite cards, so. And then 3 Ash Blossom, which, like I said, I know it can get chain blocked a lot of times nowadays, but you always seem to have usage for it no matter the deck you're playing. Like, I like using this. I'll never just blind Ash Blossom, let's say an E-Telly on turn 1. I'm always going to wait until my opponent makes a big field. You break that field, and then whatever card they happen to top deck into, or if they have a card where they have to pitch out of their hand as cost in order to special or add to hand or something, that's when you Ash Blossom. Because then they're down an extra card, they've already lost their first turn field. It's more of a mid to late game card, but it's also good early game whenever your opponent has fusion spells, so it has a lot of usage. So that's it, we got 22 monsters. Onto the spells. You got 3 Waterfront. A lot of people don't even know what this does, and really a lot of times when people just try to knee-jerk destroy this, I'll have other cards to go with it, and they won't even pay attention to those, and oftentimes those are what kills you. Or if they go after the floodgates, but they're not paying attention to the field spell because they don't know how the field spell and how the Kaiju monsters work with it, oftentimes they'll leave that in play and just let Gamasiel gain a lot of counters so it can negate all their stuff in one swing. So Waterfront plays like a weird little mind game with your opponent sometimes. Every time a card's sent from the field to the grave, you put a Kaiju counter on it, and it has a max of 5. And it's a Rhoda once per turn when it has 3 or more Kaiju. And if it will be destroyed by card effect, you can remove a Kaiju counter instead. So once it's on the field, it's basically not leaving. So, very good card. Yeah, 3 Kaiju Slumber, probably the best card in the deck. Just really great. I mean, great board breaker. Oftentimes you Kaiju 1 monster. Like, you go Waterfront, and then you'll like Kaiju over 1 monster. That's 1 counter. And then you Slumber, and that's probably 4 or 5 counters right there. You got 3 Pot of Prosperity. I mean, standard, almost. You got 2 Nadir Servant, just pairs well with Ecclesia. And I mean, it's also good to help break first turn fields if you use it with Elder Natis or whatever have you. And then you got the 1 Regeki. This is really the only card you can maybe call like a fluff choice, but it does work really well with Gamasiel if you have counters. It can also break first turn fields. It's also not the worst with Jizukuru. I mean, it does have good usage in the deck, so never really the worst option to have. And then Terraforming, just get to Waterfront, you know. For spells onto the traps, 3 There Can Be's, which is pretty much the only card of its kind that Kaiju can play. You can't play Gozen, can't play Rivalry for obvious reasons. So you really just stick with There Can Be. And I mean, you can put it in the main or put it in the side, but I just find that There Can Be, it seems to always have use. Even if it doesn't completely shut your opponent down, it kind of forces them to play left-handed. And then on top of that, when they have to play left-handed and then you're tributing all their shit away with Kaiju, it's a pretty tough spot for your opponent to be in. And then 2 Dogmatic Punishment, just great card. It's it for main onto the extra. It's pretty simple. We got Starving Venom, Mud Dragon, Salamangreat Violent Chimera, Chimera Attack, Double Natis. You got Ash Dragon, and you also play this guy, the Tri-Brigade guy, because it works well if you have, like, let's say 2 Luna in hand or something like that. You know, you don't ever want to have 2 Luna in hand. It's one of the downsides of this deck is opening multiple Luna, so you can use Nadir Servant or Dogmatic Punishment, send this, and then, you know, you draw a card, you put the Luna back in your deck, and then you normal summon the Luna and search it again. So, nice little combo there. The Exceeds, you got Dingirsu, the, what do you call it, Heliopolis. Haven't seen this card in a while, to be honest, but you got Franken, you got Hope Harbinger, the Majestus Link, Masquerena, and Unicorn. On to the side deck. This is where there's a little more spice. You got the double Denko Sekka. Hate this card with a passion, wish they would ban it, but it's here, so you might as well play it. It's really good against back row. You guys know what it does. 2 Fossil Dyna. People would say, like, why would you play this whenever you play Kaiju? But oftentimes you Kaiju your opponent, put a Kaiju on your field, and then summon the Fossil Dyna. So that way your Kaiju swings over theirs, and they have a Fossil Dyna to deal with. Then you got double Psy Blocker. This is, they're like, why on earth would you play this in 2022, Gage? But no, there is a method to my madness. Fear not. So, first of all, one of the only things that Kaiju lose to is anti-special summon cards. You know, barrier statues, if it's the wrong attribute, things like that will absolutely shut this deck down. So you use cards like Psyblocker, turn off that specific card, and then proceed to break their field. And you have cards like Ecclesia, Luna, and Nadir Servant, and Raigeki and whatnot to help break fields, but it's also just good to have another answer to specific cards. Because this deals with a lot of generic meta and whatnot, but sometimes those specific cards like Barrier Statues, or Fossil Dyna, or Vanity's Fiend, or whatever have you, are what gives you the most trouble, and Psyblocker stops literally all of them. And also you can do cute stuff where, like, let's say you're worried about an Ash Blossom stopping your Kaiju Slumber, you just go Psyblocker, call Ash Blossom, and they cry. So then triple Super Poly, just great, it's damn near staple in most of my side decks. I mean, another good board breaker. You're going second deck, so why not? You got triple Solemn Judgment. It's just when your opponent makes you go first, because unless they're bad, they will usually make you go first. And that's another tightrope that I've tried to get this deck to walk, is the idea that it can still play first. Now, it's a Kaiju deck, so does it want to go second? Of course it does, but you have 3 Fairy Tail Luna, 3 Ecclesia, the Deer Servant, you have Ash Blossoms, you have trap cards, you have all sorts of options so that if they make you go first, you're not dead in the water. That's another reason that I'm not playing cards like Owner Seal, where they're just exclusively going second cards and they're situational. You want your openings to be consistent. And then close it out with 3 Skill Drain, which is just played against X deck, you pretty much auto-win, Flunderies or whatever have you, so. But yeah, this is, I think, a really good Dark Horse deck right now. I'm really enjoying it, it's very consistent. And I mean, like, I've been playing Kaiju for so long now, and I mean, I feel like I'm just now turning the corner into competitive play with this deck. And I mean, it's been the hardest deck I've ever had to put together and get to work before. Like, easily. I can't even think of a close second. But if you have the time and you have the patience for this deck, it has a huge learning curve, but this is a really good template, I think, if you want to play a pure Kaiju control deck. So that's it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any suggestions in the comments, and I'll see you soon.